The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Yes, and welcome back to this episode of Marketing with Purpose. As you know, it's a segment of the Bliss Business Podcast where we really love to explore what it takes for marketing leaders like Travis, who's with us today, to create impact that really has to go beyond just the numbers. I'm your co-host this week, Mike Liskey, and in each of these episodes, we sit down with a marketing expert to really explore their leadership approach, strategies that drive performance, and really, how they resonate with our audience. And together with Travis today, we'll really do a deep dive into, for example, what's working, what's not, as we love to discuss as well, how purpose and empathy come into play in the work that we do, and really try to transform the way brands connect with people. So we'll just jump right in and get started. So today I'm so excited to have joining with me Travis Arnesen. He's the Vice President of Marketing with the brand Service Experts. Now, Travis brings more than 20 years of experience in brand strategy, performance marketing, and omnichannel campaigns, really being able to help organizations connect marketing with the super important measurable business results that, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're delivering. And at Service Experts, he leads the enterprise marketing strategy, the brand development for that incredible franchise, and as well, customer engagement for one of the nation's leading residential HVAC service companies. He does this really through drawing on leadership experience with brands that he's had previously, like Harbor Freight Tools. His pro bono work, I loved reading this, Travis, your pro bono work that you do through the Taproot Foundation. Travis really believes, because of that marketing can drive both business growth, but also meaningful community impact, which we love to talk about. So today we're going to really explore aligning marketing with business growth. And I'm super excited to dive into how, Travis does that and really creates the strategies and be able to strengthen the organization and the community that they serve at the end of the day. So Travis, welcome to the show. We are delighted to have you here with us.
Thanks so much, Mike, for having me. I'm excited to be here. Yeah.
And I'm really excited to, hear more about how you're doing things there with Service Experts. Now, Travis, before we really dive into a whole bunch of other topics, marketing related, I'd love to hear why was aligning the marketing with the business growth really the topic that you chose for us to explore today? Why is it, I guess, so important in today's world?
Yeah, great question, and it's probably the one I get asked the most, particularly from leadership, is connecting marketing to impact. What impact is marketing having? And really, at the end of the day, marketing needs to be measured by business outcomes, not just marketing outputs. And I think as marketers, we often fall into the trap of sometimes communicating, vanity metrics, right? Reach, impressions, followers, versus really measuring what type of impact each marketing action is having on our organization and really driving growth. Yeah. And at the end of the day, every dollar should connect to growth, revenue, retention, or customer value. And I think that's really what we're tasked with, and what, why I was so interested in this and really help communicate our strategies. Today's CEOs and CFOs expect marketing to be accountable. And to do that as marketers and as a marketing team, we need to be brutally honest and transparent as an internal team and adopt that same mindset. Everything we're doing needs to have a measurable outcome.
Yeah, for sure. Right. I think definitely gone are the days of the famous quote of, I know that 50% of my budget is working. I just don't know which 50%. I couldn't agree with you more. And I feel, as marketers, we owe it in a way to the rest of the organization to really be able to build the kind of marketing that does that. So I guess maybe digging into this topic a little bit more, because I know it's obviously important to have strategy to help lead that growth. But we fall into the challenge of sometimes having to demonstrate short-term business results or even results for a particular campaign, and then balance that with the kind of brand that we're trying to build, the kind of impression that we're trying to make with our target audience. So how is it that, with your marketing and your leadership, that you're able to, still sort of keep the marketing strategy aligned with the company growth goals? And maybe do you run into some points of friction when we're trying to, say, hey, let's demonstrate, some of these short-term business results? We get pulled in that direction. But then, how do we also maintain the tough job of, building the brand for the long term?
Yeah, this is a great question and a great point. I love the fact you used that adage, the famous TV adage of 50% waste. So it's so true. And I think there's often a friction point around this short-term, long-term discussion, right? And the way I think about it is performance marketing captures demand today. Brand marketing lowers acquisition costs tomorrow. And so I think one of the pitfalls is sort of falling into this either or conversation of needing to decide. And at the end of the day, I found the best strategies really pair these things together. And it's about the synergies of both. It's not either or, it's how do we make them work together? And while that balance may shift, what percentage goes to long-term versus short-term, right? There's lots of debate about what that right optimal mix is. And there's some pretty sophisticated tools out there now, a lot of which we utilize, like, marketing mix modeling or commercial mix modeling, MTA, multi-touch attribution. There's lots of systems that are, utilized to make those types of decisions. But at the end of the day, it doesn't alleviate. There's monthly and quarterly pressure versus multi-year growth goals. There's departmental silos. There's sometimes misaligned KPIs. So at the end of the day, I think it's about keeping that dialogue and keeping the mindset that it's not either or, it's both. Yeah. They're synergistic. They need to work together, and there's a balance between the two to be optimized.
Yeah. I think you hit on a point, earlier. In fact, prior to the show this morning, I was, working on going through an audit, and, for example, trying to identify like where are the performance leaks. But you're absolutely right. There are these metrics out there that are also long-term kinds of metrics. Like in particular, like I like to look at, hey, has branded search terms increased over the lifetime, or is that decreasing? Because that, I think, right, is people are starting to get to know the brand in the marketplace. Maybe when you first launch a product or you first launch a brand, no one's searching for that, but now are those specific terms starting to show up? I think that's more of a long-term indicator. And like you said, acquisition costs, are we driving our acquisition costs? Another great metric to be able to take a look at and say, hey, what we're doing is working because we're meeting the short-term business results, but at the same time, we've got these long-term indicators that are being positively impacted. That's such an insightful point. So Travis, I'm actually quite curious, right? So leading a franchise, national franchise brand, there are things that you want to see as the franchisor and efforts that you're trying to make in trying to grow that brand presence and the marketing that you're doing, as well as keeping an eye towards the local franchisee, and then they've got certain goals that they want to meet. So how do you work through that? How do you balance both this national brand and the things that you're trying to achieve locally?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the way we sort of divide those responsibilities here at Service Experts really comes down to the geography. So, things that are really upper funnel brand related, national media opportunities, TV, radio sponsorships, things on a large national scale, we handle at corporate. And then obviously the home services industry is still very local. It's very door to door, very community engagement. And so more of the local marketing activities are handled either by our corporate centers or by the franchisees locally. And we hand off those playbooks. We certainly have tactics and support to help guide those decisions. But ultimately on the day-to-day, it really is up to the franchisees. And there are standards we expect, as service experts, we expect a customer in California to have the same experience as a customer in Florida, as a customer in Maine. And so, having those guidelines and the consistency and the standards is so important. And then it's really up to the franchisees to execute those and ensure that we're giving the customer the same experience.
Yeah. Such a good point. I think that a lot of brands make the mistake of thinking that, they can come out with this, brand and like, this is what our brand is and what it stands for. But, in reality, the brand is the collection of all of those experiences. And I think to your point, right? If it's a home service franchise, if it's a restaurant chain, you expect a particular experience across, all of the locations. So really making sure to maintain that sort of shared experience, super critical in being able to build the kind of brand that you want. Now, of course, business doesn't always go swimmingly. There's times where there's either a crisis or in some cases, markets tend to turn downwards. And it's at that point that, leaders tend to really have to show up and maintaining perhaps a sense of purpose, demonstrating empathy, at the same time while having to meet the strategic and make the strategic decisions, right? To meet kind of the business results. So tell me, Travis, maybe, what have you found to work for you or to be helpful in helping to maintain, I guess, a sense of purpose and empathy during times of crisis?
Yeah, I will say, unfortunately, I have experience in this space. And first and foremost, number one thing is take a deep breath, right? Number one thing in the crisis playbook is slow down emotionally, speed up operationally, and take a deep breath to establish the right strategy and protocol. And I think identifying first what is the focus on the affected customer or employee or party, whoever that might be. And I think number one important thing is to lead with transparency, empathy, and facts. It takes years to build and establish trust with customers or employees or a party, and that trust can be broken in an instant. And so how companies respond in crisis is really, really important. Even lack of response, because believe it or not, lack of response is a response, and people will react to that. So I think it's extremely important to protect trust above and beyond, again, to short-term, long-term. And, giving an example, being with a large national retailer that had a massive product recall that went back, thousands of units in years. Wow. The company made the very expensive, what I think was right decision to recall everything, whether it was a part of a certain law code or not. Maintaining customer trust was more important than what it was going to cost, which, was expensive. And I think that was super important. And those are the types of decisions that customers, customers can feel if a company is operating above board or not. And I think those are the types of decisions that go beyond just the balance sheet and establish that long-term trust.
Yeah. I think, right. Like if you make that trust your North Star, and then do those things, as you said, the transparency, the communication, so critical, without a doubt. So, Travis, I know you've got a good amount of experience in terms of either launching new services or even launching new geographies, new locations. It's sometimes a challenge to try to get full alignment throughout the organization on how to do that or what we're doing. So I'm curious, are there some tools you use, or what are some effective ways that you've seen work for you and your organizations to create alignment, sort of within the organization, from say sales and operations to maybe like product and even the local franchisees?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, bringing stakeholders into planning early. It's probably stating the obvious. Most people think that, but I'd be surprised at how often it doesn't happen, or a lot of times because of pace. Different companies have different timelines for when they roll out, new products and services. Some it's fast and nimble, some it's a very long, stage gate process. And no matter what, across the board, bringing stakeholders in early is critical.
Yeah.
The other things I would say are just, aligning everyone around either a common customer journey or at least a common endpoint. Things never go right when there's different definitions of success or different objectives. So at least if there's alignment on what the end objective and goal is, everyone's going the same direction. There may be different paths to get there. At least they're going the same direction. Whereas if there's different objectives and teams are going different directions, it's never going to work.
Yeah, it's never good. Wow, that is so much depth and insight in that. We can do a whole show just on those points that you raised. That was so good. Now we talked earlier in the show really about marketing having to drive or demonstrate results. It's really today needing to be more of a predictable revenue engine. So as we sort of think about different stages from the growth stage, I'd love to hear like what's most important when it comes to business outcomes, from marketing, because we're expected to say, influence the local area, start to, provide air cover, say for the brand. I'd really love to, sort of understand, how do you operate so that marketing is more of a predictable revenue engine versus, some of this like smoke and mirrors, or, we don't really know what necessarily is working within marketing.
Yeah, a lot of it, I would say, really has to do establishing the right KPIs up front. I mean, really gaining alignment, particularly with leadership, about what the things are that marketing specifically should influence. Because on any given reporting period, it's easy to go down the rabbit hole and focus on different things or, industry trends. At the end of the day, what are the right impacts and things that marketing should influence? In my opinion, marketing should influence customer acquisition, customer retention, lifetime value, brand positioning and perception, and revenue growth. And so at the end of the day, if we maintain those key KPIs, and you mentioned North Star, it's like, what's the North Star? So at the end of the day, are we doing those things well? Are we having the right impact? Are we moving in the right direction? And then the answer becomes a little, simpler. It's yes or no, or maybe some combination thereof.
Yeah. I'd have to agree with you. I think one of my, favorite metrics that I tend to, look at is lifetime value over cost of acquisition, right? So to your point earlier in the show about, long-term trying to reduce the cost of acquisition, if that ratio, right, is moving in the right direction, if lifetime value is increasing and cost of acquisition is decreasing, great thing to be able to take a look at. So Travis, I want to get real for a little bit. I'm just curious, in terms of the marketing that you're seeing today, we face as marketers challenges on a daily, quarterly, annual basis. Is there something, as of right now with regards to hitting those KPIs that feels like, hey, this is just way harder than it should be?
In general, I think there's in not just the home services industry, but in the digital marketing space in general, the landscape is changing so quickly. With AI and the online environment and the behemoths like Google and Claude and GPT, right? Like there's disruption that used to take months and years that's taking weeks. And so the landscape is literally changing underneath us as we're operating. And so, cost per lead is getting more expensive. The rules of search, organic, whether you call it SEO, AEO, GEO, being found online in whatever acronym you want to use is becoming more challenging, and it's shifting. And so I think that's a very dynamic environment to operate in, particularly in a large enterprise where we have established systems and processes and measurement tools that often need to be adapted. And so it's a very challenging environment. I think being nimble and having the right team and staying focused on the right things that matter to drive business growth is where we found success. But I would not call it easy either.
Yeah, right. It's like the game board is almost sort of, obviously, being changed in front of us. And I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about that, maybe even after the show, because we're finding for our agency clients the exact same thing. So we had to, as an agency, kick off a specific initiative to figure out like what are the tactics, what are the things that we need to be doing for our clients to help with just that, right? And I think we've identified, and it's funny because it's in some cases it's keep doing the same things, like those foundational, the right ways to build your site, for example, that you should be doing this whole time. But yeah, in particular, I think we've identified a few things that are absolutely critical. I think I saw a statistic that something in the area of maybe 60% of web traffic today is bot traffic. And bots like to consume data differently than a human being, right? So if we're going to satisfy that demand from this bot traffic, then so important for us to be able to do it, be doing it the right way. Now, when it comes to Travis, managing marketing talent, I'm curious in terms of your approach. Maybe tell us, like, how big is your marketing team with service experts? Do you also have to work with outside consultants or agencies and then try to manage them? How big is that? And then what do you do, I guess, to really try to develop them and make sure that they're also succeeding in their marketing skills?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So the current corporate marketing team at Surface Experts is between 15 and 20 people. We have a franchise team as well, and we use a combination of both, internal and external agency resources, depending on the exact solution and channel. One of the things that I really look for to foster talent is curiosity and adaptability. I mean, of course, subject matter expertise is a bare minimum. It's a requirement, but beyond that, it's, people who can operate in the dynamic environment that we've been discussing, people who can thrive in that type of environment. And ultimately, I think people who are searching for ownership, not just sort of task management. And I often go back to a book I read a long time ago called Drive by Daniel Pink, but he talks about the importance of autonomy, mastery, and purpose, and how that as a motivator is much stronger than just, dollars. It's a stronger incentive than just pay. Now there's minimums, there's Maslow hierarchy, of course, right? People need to survive, but beyond that, there are other motivations to keep people really engaged, and with the shared purpose, shared vision, autonomy, and mastery, that's where things can get really successful.
Oh, brilliant. We should have you on the Bliss Business Podcast to talk about that in particular, because we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs quite often, and in particular, right, those higher stages, like the self-actualization levels of the pyramid. To your point, they could be so much deeper in terms of motivation and getting to a common purpose, which actually that's almost even like a great segue into our next segment is really around purpose and empathy that we love to talk about, because it leads to we believe as an agency the greatest impact. So talk to us a little bit about how do purpose and empathy sort of shape the approach that you take in your marketing today.
Yeah, I mean, to me, every campaign impacts a real person. And I feel proud to work in the industry that we do. HVAC, plumbing, electrical services, they're not luxuries, especially during extreme weather. People depend on our services for safety and for comfort. And also, I think just beyond the customers we serve, having an enterprise that provides families a living. Yes, we are a for-profit company, but we employ people and have purpose in that, in being a sustainable business. And to me, that's really important. That's a mission I can stand behind. The fact that our day-to-day work actually impacts people positively, and by having a successful business, it can sustain the livelihoods of the people that serve it. And so we have a mantra, we call it the golden rule here at Service Experts: treat every home like it's one of our own. And to me, that speaks to this sort of philosophy that we are impacting people's lives in a positive manner on a daily basis. And if we do that, if we treat every home like it's one of our own, we will have done a good job by our customers. We will do right by our people. We will continue to operate a successful, sustainable business.
Oh, that's such a gem. No pun intended that it's a nugget. But yeah, I love that, because then every employee, no matter where they are in this country, if you can't, touch them or talk to them on a daily basis, a good, mantra like that definitely creates alignment, across the organization. So, Travis, wow, thank you so much for joining us today on the Marketing with Purpose series. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Mike. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and for our audience too, we hope that really today's conversation sparked some new ideas. Certainly, from what Travis, shared, be able to, take some of those action items and, put them to use and implement them in your day. Really, at the end of the day, to build stronger connection, not just across your teams, but, even across the whole organization, and really be able to start to build the marketing strategies that, we know are super important to be not just really measurable, but more aligned, collaborative, and at the end of the day, more human, so that they can make the right kind of impact. And we would love it, if you found value in this discussion, please, subscribe, share it, keep the conversation going. Feel free to comment on any of the information that was shared today. And really, I think we love to kind of close with this, is like remembering that great marketing really just doesn't deliver performance. It's not just all about selling, but great marketing at the end of the day connects and serves. And so we'll leave you with that and see you on the next episode of the Marketing with Purpose series.